Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today let's go over the market, see what happened to Tesla, and essentially, how the week closed off and what we can expect for next week. So as usual, if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. But let's just get this party started. Tesla ending the day actually green on a pretty red day for the markets. Barely up, but up 0.2% still. That's not too bad, right? Ending the day at just shy of $817, which isn't all that bad. So what does it mean? What can we determine from this? And what, can we expect, I guess, is the best question, right? So first and foremost, right, like I said, we are still, in my opinion, playing out this bear flag, right? Ultimately, I believe we are playing out this bear flag. And you can see Tesla is definitely finding some resistance here, like I mentioned, right? It is finding some resistance. It did actually rally decently high, pretty high. This 841 was pretty good, actually. But then, it got smacked back down, and then it kind of got fallen back into this bear flag-ish. But we still need to see a little bit more of how it plays around this area to really determine, the structure of the bear flag, if that makes sense. So far, it's kind of doing what I expected it to do, though it's still showing more strength than I also expected. Again, being up 0.2% when the QQQ is down almost 2%. The SPY is even down 1%, right? And Tesla is still green on that. Not too bad. So another thing that's actually pretty good for Tesla so far is the fact that it was able to still close above yesterday's close, right? Yesterday's close was just a tad lower at like 815. We closed at 817 essentially, right? Not too many points, only a few points higher, but nonetheless, it's still, better than. It's more bullish than bearish, let's just say that, right? So that's a good sign, honestly. And the RSI is still actually not looking too bad. So ultimately, I don't think Tesla's looking bad. I do think it does need a little bit of a breather here. And I personally do think we're going to start retracing. But I'll give you guys kind of a projection as to what I personally think, not even just for next week, what I personally think will happen for the next potentially few weeks, ultimately. Potentially even up until the end of August, right? Ultimately, what I personally think is going to happen, just based on, experience, based on just seeing these things kind of play out often. Sometimes when you get these kind of bear flags or even bull flags, it doesn't really matter, right? So like I said, usually you have a 5 touch point, right? And the 5th one being the one that breaks down. Usually, sometimes it's 7, but usually it's 5, let's just say, right? For the sake of this example, it's very common. So essentially I have the flag right here. That's small. Let me make this a little thicker just so you guys can see better what I'm referring to here, just so it kind of makes a little more sense. How do I, let's do a 4, there we go. Let's just do that. Oops. All right. So essentially what you have is, more or less somewhere around here, you have the flag, the pole rather, starting. That's 1 touch point, 2, 3, right? We touched here twice, but ultimately it's still overall a 3 touch point because we never went back up. This is 4, right? Now, usually what can happen, one way is essentially just go from here straight down, maybe have a small bounce and then fall. That's kind of, very common. Another thing that can happen instead is you fall back down like this, about halfway-ish usually is what they do, is what I've noticed, right? They fall about halfway-ish down, about to the middle of the flag that you're in, or the pennant, or whatever, in this case, the flag. And then they actually bounce up one more time for a potential final bounce like this, and then they ultimately fall. Something like that, right? Personally, I think this is potentially what's going to play out. Not only will this line up with what I personally see happening with the indices and everything like that right now, which we'll go over in a bit, but it will also essentially not only confirm the fact that we are definitely in a bear flag, it'll also bounce off the trend line, which, again, it's pretty common to kind of, come back and retest the breakout, which in this case, exactly what it would do, come back, retest the breakout on the red line, give or take, not exactly here, obviously, but somewhere around this general area, it can happen sooner than later, later than sooner, who knows. Ultimately, right, gap fill this area around 744, bounce, probably find another relief rally up to the top channel of this bear flag, ultimately make essentially a double top right here, and then that plus the bear flag is going to be ultra bearish and it's going to fall down. And personally, I think it'll come back down all the way to about that 550 to 450 range, where I'm personally very patiently, let's just say, waiting for it, right? Again, I could be completely wrong, not financial advice, make your own decisions as usual, right? I could be absolutely horribly wrong. That is always possible. It is the market, right? It's extremely difficult to be correct all the time, let alone often. But that's kind of what I'm personally projecting, right? And the main reason also is because, Tesla is a little bit on the overbought side, right? It does need a bit of a relief. Again, we'll go over the indices very soon because that kind of lines up with that. But with that being said, I personally think as we kind of, get this relief to the downside and get a, retracements, that's going to give time for the major EMA and moving averages and all that stuff to catch up. So for instance, you have the EMA 21 being way below. I think it'll catch up to us right around this area and we'll probably bounce off of that. The Bollinger Band, the white line, same concept, right? The 50-day moving average, also same concept. The 10 and the 5. The 5 is already much higher because it's a much shorter time frame, so it follows much more strictly. But nonetheless, I personally think that we will be coming down to this general area, bouncing off the majority of these that I just showed you, which pretty much line up with around the mid 700s is what I said. And off of that, I think we'll bounce, probably get one more rally up somewhere to the same level that we did up here, which will be around that 850-ish level, give or take. Somewhere, probably like late August. There's something else actually I want to show you guys. Let me show you guys very quickly what that is. It's actually quite important. And then I think from that, we will, of course, double top and start actually fully playing out the bear flag. That's what I'm personally projecting right now. Something else to back up this, right? I don't want to just give you guys random stuff like this without, kind of backing it up a bit, right? So one thing that I like to, first and foremost, this Twitter guy right here, Morrow, fantastic Twitter. I like following him. I think he has fantastic, thought processes and how he sees things playing out. So I definitely recommend following him if you guys want more opinions, more thoughts, because it's very important to follow people that you personally not necessarily trust, but whose opinion you personally believe is worth listening to, I guess, right? So if I'm one of those people for you, it's good to always take what I say and incorporate it into what you're thinking, into your own projections and things like that. But one thing that I personally like that he's posted that makes a lot of sense, he posted this a while ago as well, is this chart right here, right? S&P 500 midterm election year seasonal pattern since 1946. So you can see there's a bunch of ways that it plays out. Currently, we are the red line. Second year, new Democratic president, of course, being Joe Biden, right? We are currently literally in the second line. And you can see it's actually playing out pretty accurately based on how we have currently played out, right? We had that run up in July with the dip. Now we're kind of running up again, which is kind of where we are right now at the end of July. August, you can see we get a bit of a overall run up as well. August tends to be pretty nice for the majority of it, maybe like 3/4 of it ish. And then late August, aka late summer, you start getting the dip into September and ultimately get another dip in September. September to October usually ends up being pretty bad, and even in November you still continue falling, right? And this is going to line up pretty damn well with the midterm elections, because we have the midterm elections, of course, for America coming up sometime in November, I believe, and the market's always extremely let's just say bipolar, if you will, very scared, almost even prior to the results, right? Because the market always hates anticipation, it always hates uncertainty until something is certain, regardless of sometimes how good or bad it is. The fact that there is certainty, the market likes that, and this kind of makes sense. So ultimately, this is kind of what I also see playing out, and kind of makes sense with the projections that I just mentioned, where we get a little bit of a trace back here potentially, right? Maybe kind of like somewhere around here. It's not going to follow exactly to the T, like line for line, pixel for pixel, obviously, but the general structure is what you want to be paying attention to, which is why I wouldn't be surprised if we get an overall trace back. Same with the SPY, right? You can see we're getting a bit of a trace back, the QQQ, right? Get a bit of a trace back. And then in August, we kind of rally a bit more, which is kind of, coinciding with what I said with Tesla. But, in August, we get a rally probably into like, near the end-ish of August. And then as we start kind of slowly leaking into September, or the later August to September, that's when we start getting that dip. That's when we start falling. September tends to be a pretty bearish month in general. I learned that the hard way last September. And then, you get a bit of a relief rally as usual. And then, of course, right into the midterm elections, or like very close to it, you get that another dip before you get the results. And then we start rallying. That's kind of what I see happening as well. It kind of makes sense. It makes sense with the projections, which is kind of what I'm personally expecting to happen here. Again, a dip, probably a rally into, late-ish August. Then we ultimately, from late-ish August to pretty much November, we're going to be ultimately dipping down. Probably somewhere around November-ish is where we'll find the bottom, somewhere around this general 550 to 450 level. And then I think from there, we can start potentially rallying into 2023, essentially, and late 2022, right? That's currently my projections. Again, could be completely wrong, could be like absolutely not even close, obviously, right? No one's perfect, no one knows exactly what'll happen. That's just kind of part of the game, right? You want to assess the highest probability of chances of something happening. I personally think that's the highest probability, which also lines up with what I showed you guys in the indexes. And you can see the VIX finally showing a little bit of steam here to potentially bounce off as well. And I think the VIX is going to be looking for a potential bounce. So ultimately, I think the VIX, as we start retracing here, can potentially break out, most likely come back to retest. And that will be the rally that we'll get into the kind of mid to late August that I just talked about for Tesla as well, which will line up with the VIX coming back to retest the breakout. And then once the VIX can successfully retest the breakout, so essentially it'll look something like this. So right now we're at where we are. We get the retracement down, like I said, to around like maybe mid 700s on Tesla, and same with the indices and everything like that as well. As the VIX breaks out, probably comes back down to retest, and this is where we get the rally into like mid-ish to late-ish August as the VIX comes back down to retest. And then as the VIX confirms the retest and the breakout and it starts rallying, that's when September essentially starts. And that's when we're going to start finding some, pain in the market. It just kind of makes sense. It just, everything seems to kind of line up, right? Again, it's not going to be as picture perfect and just as simple as that. Obviously, the market's going to be as complicated as it possibly can be. It usually is like that. I've also learned that the hard way. You just kind of you just have to have the conviction to what you believe will happen. And that's really, really important. The market, I've always found that even though that I'm very confident that'll happen, it'll still find a way to make that structure and that path that I think it'll follow look like as complicated as it can, essentially, because again, it's not easy, right? This game is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. That's kind of what I'm seeing, guys. So that's my ultimate projection going out until essentially like almost like the end of the year from now ish, give or take, right? That's what I see, and that's what I'm thinking. But if we want to talk about the next week or two, again, personally think that we're going to be getting the retracement. I'm personally just going to be waiting for Tesla to come back to around the mid 700s ish, give or take, right? Maybe 760. Really depends on how fast it comes down. The faster it comes down, the higher the bar will be in terms of how. I don't think it'll fall as low, but the longer it takes, the slightly lower it can potentially fall, ultimately to retest the red line. And then from there, I think we'll bounce up. And by essentially mid to late August, we'll probably get a double top somewhere around this general level of the mid 800s. That's what I'm expecting, guys. So let me know what you think down below. Quick look at the 15-minute chart. You can see massive bearish divergence coming up as well, right? As Tesla essentially found highs. It pretty much, RSI has pretty much stayed exactly the same, if not lower. And then as Tesla is still chilling around the same area as it did here, the RSI is like way, way lower, right? So we're essentially setting up a bearish divergence. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some pain into next week. I'll be looking for the dips to sell puts against. And yeah, I'm personally just being patient. I'm not, too worried. It's setting up essentially what looks to be a mini head and shoulders here. Shoulder, shoulder, head. Yeah, I don't know. To me, things are looking, it's looking, I don't want to say obvious, but it is. The market will still find a way to make this difficult as usual, but that's the structure I'm seeing. That's what I'm looking for to play for the short term and the long term. Hopefully that helps you guys, understand what I'm personally, playing towards. You can see on the weekly chart, we are still ultimately in this bear flag as well. Beautiful rejection, closed just below the blue line. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm seeing, guys. Hopefully this video you guys found, useful, informative, whatever. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.